Let's look at some complex number exercises. Add or subtract as indicated and write the result in standard form. 2 plus 3i plus 4 minus 5i. We don't need the parentheses here, and if you want, you can group the real parts and the imaginary parts. The real parts are 2 and 4, and the imaginary parts are 3 and negative 5. 2 plus 4 is 6, and 3i minus 5i is negative 2i. So we get 6 minus 2i, and we are done with this problem. Let's look at 7i minus 5 minus 11i. When removing the parentheses with the negative sign in front, we flip the signs inside of the parentheses. So the 5 becomes negative 5 and negative 11i becomes positive 11i. (7i plus 11i is 18i. So we get negative 5 plus 18i, and we are done with this problem. Let's look at negative 6 plus 2i minus 3 minus I. Positive 3 becomes negative 3, and negative I becomes positive I. Negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9, and 2i plus I is 3i. So we get negative 9 plus 3i, and we are done with this problem. What about 3 minus minus 4 plus 2i minus minus 5 minus I? The negative 4 becomes positive 4. 2i becomes negative 2i, negative 5 becomes positive 5, and negative I becomes positive I. 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 5 is 12. And negative 2i plus I is negative I. So we get 12 minus I, and we're done with this problem. Find each product and write the result in standard form. Negative 2i times 3i plus 4. Negative 2i times 3i is negative 6i squared. And negative 2i times 4 is negative 8i. I squared is negative 1. And negative 6 times negative 1 is 6. So we get 6 minus 8i, and we are done with this problem. What about negative 3 minus 5i times 2 minus 7i? Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Negative 3 times negative 7i is 21i. Negative 5i times 2 is negative 10i. And negative 5i times negative 7i is 35i squared. 21i minus 10i is 11i. And I squared is negative 1. Negative 6 minus 35 is negative 41. So we get negative 41 plus 11i, and we are done with this problem. Let's look at 3 minus 2i in parentheses squared. 3 minus 2i in parentheses squared has the form a minus b in parentheses squared, which is a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So we get 3 squared minus 2 times 3 times 2i plus 2i squared. 3 squared is 9. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 times 2i is negative 12i. 2i squared is 4i squared. I squared is negative 1. And 9 minus 4 is 5. So we get 5 minus 12i, and we are done with this problem. Let's look at 5 plus I in parentheses times 2 minus I in parentheses. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times negative I is negative 5i. I times 2 is 2i. And I times negative I is negative I squared. Negative 5i plus 2i is negative 3i. And negative I squared is negative 1. 10 plus 1 is 11. So we get 11 minus 3i, and we are done with this problem. Divide and express the result in standard form. The complex conjugate of 3 plus 4i is 3 minus 4i. Two times 3 is 6. And 2 times negative 4i is negative 8i. 3 times 3 is 9. And 4i squared is negative 16. Nine plus 16 is 25. So we get 6 over 25 minus 8 over 25i. And we are done with this problem. The conjugate of 5 minus 3i is 5 plus 3i. So we get 5i times 5 is 25i, and 5i times 3i is negative 15. 5 squared is 25. And 3i squared is negative 9. So we get negative 15 plus 25i over 34, which is negative 15 over 34 plus 25 over 34 times I. And we are done with this problem. The complex conjugate of 2 minus 3i is 2 plus 3i. Four times 2 is 8. And 4 times 3i is 12i. 2 squared is 4. And 3i squared is negative 9. So we get 8 plus 12i over 13, which is then 8 over 13 plus 12 over 13 times I. The complex conjugate of 4 plus 3i is 4 minus 3i. Two times 4 is 8, and 2 times negative 3i is negative 6i. Negative 3i times 4 is negative 12i, and negative 3i times negative 3i is negative 9. Four squared is 16, and 3i squared is negative 9. Minus 6i minus 12i is minus 18i. And 16 plus 9 is 25. 8 minus 9 is negative 1. So we get negative 1 over 25 minus 18 over 25 times I, and we're done with this problem. Perform the indicated operations and write the result in standard form. The square root of negative 16 minus the square root of negative 9. The square root of negative 16 is I times the square root of 16, and the square root of negative 9 is I times the square root of 9. The square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 9 is 3. 4i minus 3i is 1i, which is I. And we're done with this problem. 3 times the square root of negative 81 plus 2 times the square root of negative 4. The square root of negative 81 is I times the square root of 81. And the square root of negative 4 is I times the square root of 4. The square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of 4 is 2. 3 times 9 is 27, and 2 times 2 is 4. 27i plus 4i is 31i. And we're done with this problem. Negative 2 minus the square root of negative 5 in parentheses squared. Do you see the pattern here? Negative 2 minus the square root of negative 5 in parentheses squared is a minus b in parentheses squared, which is a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So we get negative 2 squared minus 2 times negative 2 times the square root of negative 5 plus the square root of negative 5 squared. Negative 2 squared is 4. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. And we can write the square root of negative 5 as I times the square root of 5. The square root of negative 5 squared is I times the square root of 5 squared. So we get 4 plus 4 times I times the square root of 5. I squared is negative 1, and the square root of 5 squared is 5. Four minus 5 is negative 1. If you want, you can write this as negative 1 plus 4 times the square root of 5 times I. And we're done with this problem. Let's look at the square root of negative 8 times the square root of negative 4 minus the square root of negative 3. The square root of negative 8 is I times the square root of 8. The square root of negative 4 is I times the square root of 4. And the square root of negative 3 is I times the square root of 3. We can write the 8 as 2 times 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And the square root of 2 times 4 is the square root of 2 times the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. I times the square root of 2 times 2i is 4i squared times the square root of 2, and 2 times I times the square root of 2 times negative I times the square root of 3 is negative 2 times I squared times the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. I squared is negative 1. And the square root of 2 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 2 times 3. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Negative 2 times negative 1 is 2. And the square root of 2 times 3 is the square root of 6. And we get negative 4 times the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 6, and we're done with this problem. Solve the quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x12 equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. A is 1, b is negative 5, and c is 8. Negative b is negative 5, so we get 5 plus minus b squared, which is negative 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 8. And at the bottom of the fraction we have 2 times a, which is 2 times 1. Negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 8 is negative 32. 2 times 1 is 2. (25) minus 32 is negative 7. And the square root of negative 7 is I times the square root of 7. So our first solution is 5 over 2 plus the square root of 7 over 2 times I. And the second solution is 5 over 2 minus the square root of 7 over 2 times I. And we're done with this problem. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. This video is what I did for you. If you want to do something for me, hit the bell button, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching and happy learning, everyone.